Okay, then over to a bit more about the double entry system. Okay, so we spoke about the 5 elements, we spoke about the accounting equation, and I briefly mentioned that the accounting equation balances because I have this idea of a double entry system. So in a bit more detail, the double entry system we also refer to as the general ledger system because that's kind of how it's illustrated. You'll hopefully understand that in a bit. So double entry also means debit and credit. So if I say I'm using a double entry system, it means I'm using a system of debits and credits. Okay, so abbreviated as DR and CR. So debit side, if you look at the debit side, typically an account would look something like this. That's why we also call this system the T account system. So because it looks like a T. Okay, so if you see something is being debited, or we speak about the debit side of an account, it means we are speaking about the left-hand side of the account. Okay, the account name goes at the top. Okay, so it's a T with a name at the top, and there's a left-hand side, which is the debit side, and there's a right-hand side, which is the credit side. You guys are going to work with debit and credit throughout the entire year. So go back to the basics in this learning unit. I really would want you to connect debit and credit with left and right because it's very important that you understand how to journalize or write in debits and credits. So that's the first very, very important thing. If I tell you you are debiting bank, I'm literally telling you that I have an entry on the left-hand side of the bank account. Okay, that's what debiting bank means. If I tell you I'm going to credit bank, it means I have an entry on the right-hand side of a T account. Okay, so debit left and credit right. Okay, that's the first important thing about the debit and the credit system. So what the words debit and credit means. The second important thing you can see on the left-hand side of your slide is that the double entry system, the one that I use an amount twice, always is made up of one debit and one credit. So that means I have an entry on the left of a specific account and I've got an entry on the right of an account. Okay, those amounts are the same. So I used 100,000 Rand earlier as an example. So I'll have 100,000 Rand on the left of an account and I will have 100,000 Rand on the right side of an account. Okay, that's two entries. So one left, one right. And left and right is also a bit of an imbalance thing. So if you can imagine it with me, there's one left, one right, which means the system balances. Okay, so we always choose one debit and one credit. So one left and one right of two different accounts. Okay, so there might be a bank, which is money, but then I'll typically ask you, what did I use the money for? Or why did I get money in? And that why would then be the other account that I would use. Okay. And the accounts that we speak about, the account names, remember they are all part of assets, liabilities, equity, income, or expenses. Okay, there's a nice page in your textbook, I think it's page 50, that has examples of all the accounts underneath all their elements. Okay, so you choose the account that you want to debit, you choose the account that you want to credit. Okay, that's the first most important thing. Or the second thing actually I said. So we've got debit and credit, meaning left and right. We always have one debit and one credit so that my debits equals my credits and my system is in balance. But now to know what to debit and what to credit, I have to think about that account. So I'm going to use bank as an example. I have to ask myself, what element does bank belong to? Now, bank being money belongs to the asset group, and assets have debits where they increase and they decrease on the credit side. Now, this diagram that you see in front of you is pretty much something that you have to learn off by heart. Okay, you can't really do accounting if you don't know the system. So for those of you that had exposure to accounting, maybe earlier grade 8, grade 9, this will be fairly familiar And if you've had accounting all the way through to maybe grade 10, 11, or 12, this should still be in the back of your mind somewhere. Okay, so just as you learn to use full stops at the end of sentences when you write in English, and whatever other punctuation rules, that seems very obvious by now, this is now a new language that you have to learn to speak. Okay, that certain elements increase on the debit side and decrease on the credit side. So that just means that if I'm debiting bank, okay, and bank is an asset, and I'm writing an entry on this side, it actually means I'm increasing bank. It means I'm getting money. Now, this might seem, and it actually should seem pretty challenging to you right now, but remember, we're teaching you this language. So by the time that you are comfortable with this, and you say back to me or back to your lecturer, oh, I'm debiting bank, they'll know exactly what you mean, okay, because you've now adopted this language. You now are able to speak, I want to say, in funny accounting, because you can just say debit and credit, and we know exactly that means plus or minus, okay, because we also have this, I want to say, diagram or picture in front of us. You have it in your brain, okay. You know that assets and expenses actually increase on the debit side, and they therefore decrease on the credit side. Okay, and we also know that liabilities and income increase on the credit side and they decrease on the debit side. Your textbook also unpacks this in quite a lot of detail, so I would advise you to go back to your textbook. But for now, you would have exposure to this in class. Your lecturer will unpack this in a lot of detail. I think just appreciate that this is something that you need to work through and teach yourself to memorize, that we have specific accounts. We write them down and say, okay, they debit, they credit. You debit bank, you credit sales, you debit vehicles, and that debit and credit means plus or minus. Okay, it means plus or minus depending whether that sales, bank, and vehicles and whatever else you use, whether that's an asset, expense, liability, or an equity. Okay, the one actually that you don't see on this is equity also increases on the same side as income and liabilities. Okay, if you very switch on, you might see some kind of pattern here that you can remember. So assets and expenses, they kind of stick on the same side of a T account in terms of plus and minus, and liabilities, income, and equity, they stick on the same side in terms of increase and decrease. Okay, there is an activity for you as well, second one, that you can look at for just testing your debit and credit knowledge.